Hello and welcome to Business Insider with Mario Toneguzzi on YYC Business. Joining me today is Annie Dormuth, who is the Alberta Director of Provincial Affairs with the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. Thanks for joining us again, Annie.
Always great to be on the show, Mario.
Well, the latest Business Barometer came out today by the CFIB. And the numbers aren't pretty across the country. And tell us what the barometer showed for Alberta.
Well, definitely there was a significant drop on the national index of nearly 12 points, which is quite the lowest that we have seen since the start of the pandemic. In Alberta, it was a little less. The 3-month and 12-month outlook dropped by 7 points each. So maybe a little bit more optimistic in the province here, but of course across Canada, there are a swell of issues that are on the minds of small business owners right now that has contributed to this, I would have to say, not very optimistic outlook for the future of their business or the economy in the next 3 and 12 months.
So tell me, what are, you're on the street talking to members, et cetera. What are they saying? Like, what is contributing to that plunge in confidence?
Well, like I said, it is a multitude of issues. Of course, the federal election just occurred, as well as we have the federal support programs, the two main ones, the wage subsidy and the rent subsidy, coming to a close in 3 weeks' time here. Quite frankly, we have not seen the economic recovery of small businesses in Alberta or really across the country that perhaps policymakers were expecting throughout the summer months here. Of course, much like everyone else, small business owners also look at the daily case numbers and again are adjusting to a new suite of different restrictions. Some of them, of course, across Canada, pretty much all provinces now have some sort of vaccine passport mandate in place, as well as the continuation or imposing new restrictions, even in Alberta here, for example, retail capacity being restricted by 1/3 once again. So all of this, I would have to say, is contributing to the stresses of small business owners right now and has contributed to the reason why we are seeing this sharp decline in the barometer this month.
Well, let's talk before we go on to something else, but let's talk about those rent and wage subsidies and how critically important are they to continue in some form once they're supposed to be up, but we'll find out. I'm hopefully soon, whether or not they will continue. I imagine they will, but are they the lifeline for a lot of these businesses?
Well, I would have to say, one of our most common calls within our business resource lines is actually concerns about those subsidies ending, especially the wage subsidy right now. That has been one of the most commonly used federal support programs next to the Canadian Emergency Business Account loan, which has now closed. So yes, I would have to say that it is still very critical that these supports continue until we're in a position where pretty much all business restrictions have been removed across the entire country and we are past this pandemic. There is no reason for any government, provincial or federal right now that should be turning off the taps to provincial support programs for business owners. And I do say provincial as well because provinces all across Canada have closed their own provincial support programs for small businesses. And with the imposition of new restrictions, we do strongly call on those governments to reopen supports, including right here in Alberta, and calling on the government of Alberta to reopen the SME relaunch grant.
Okay. Now, we talked about the restrictions, and in Alberta, obviously, we're well aware of what's transpiring and the new restrictions that came into play here a couple of weeks ago now. Is that some of the reasons that you think that are contributing to the mental frame of mind of these business owners? And I'll give you an example. Like this whole proof of vaccination thing, right? It really has polarized things. One I won't mention the name, but one high-profile restaurant in Inglewood, whose doors are shut by the health authorities because they did not want to do that, right? And there is a movement afoot, and I've spoken to Dan Kelly, the president of the CFIB, about this, a movement afoot of many businesses saying no, they're not going to follow the regulations. And then of course, you have the other side of the coin, is the businesses that do follow it, and they become the quote unquote police, right? And so to speak. And they're facing a backlash. One of my favorite pizza joints, for example, the other day I was at their place, and the owner says last week was the worst week he's ever had in his life, outside of family deaths, and it was because he publicly said yes, he's going to follow the rules, and he got backlash for that. Right, he got protests outside his door, people phoning the restaurant, harassing the staff, going on to Google reviews and slamming the company. Like I don't know, like, what do you tell businesses these days, in this environment? And obviously it's for them.
Well, obviously, yes, it's
Yeah,
incredibly stressful for business owners. And one of the biggest
yeah,
concerns we've heard from business owners across Canada is really, the amount of pressure they are under by being the vaccine police.
yeah,
I've been calling on all Albertans, anyone really, if you have a problem with the REP, that is the restriction exemption program, you should not be taking it out on your local business owner that is simply doing this to survive on already weak revenues for nearly 2 years now. If you do have a problem with any of these restrictions, I would say go to your MLA's office or go to the government buildings, the provincial government buildings, and leave your small businesses alone that again are doing this simply to survive. So it is very unfortunate to hear those cases. And of course, we've been hearing those cases as well, all across Canada, with the imposition of any type of vaccine passport.
but it's a fine thing to say for people, right? But when the reality hits, these business owners and more importantly, their staff are on the front line, right? And they're feeling this abuse, and it doesn't matter what side of the spectrum you're on, right? Whether pro or against vaccines. So I can clearly see why that business confidence overall is falling these days, right? And do you think there's any hope in sight there for business owners? Like, man, we're going to be approaching 2 years here in a few months, and it doesn't seem to be ending.
Well, like I said, this was a 1 month indicator, so we will have to see if this does become a trend in November, but definitely quite alarming. Within the organization, we've been always fearing that perhaps this is the shoe that might be dropping. Almost an indicator of what is, small businesses simply cannot take it anymore. So again, that is why it's really imperative that first, the federal government does continue these critical support programs, as well as the provincial government looks at reopening for a fourth round its own SME
Yeah.
relaunch grant here in the province. So we will see what happens in November, but I would have to say this significant drop across Canada, across all industries really, is really quite alarming.
I'm just curious, Annie, do you have any kind of idea of since the pandemic, how many fewer businesses we have in Alberta than we had, say, before?
Stats Canada is really the only kind of, I would say, format that has tracked that. And unfortunately, it's always quite a bit delayed.
Yeah,
For example, I think its latest results only take into account up to June or July. The CFIB regularly surveys its members on whether or not they are actively considering closing or claiming bankruptcy. Now, unfortunately, in the province of Alberta, we've had that highest percentage of business owners at that brink of bankruptcy or permanently closing, kind of hitting between 22 and 19%, which equates to 1 in 5 businesses that are actively considering closing, which really totals 34,500 small businesses that could be lost across the province.
yeah.
And that's what we indicate, or we use as an indicator of businesses that might be closing, but Stats Canada would have the more accurate picture of how many have closed.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see how how things unravel here in the next couple of weeks, especially with those federal support programs. Thanks, Annie, for joining us today.
Of course, anytime, Mario.
All right, that was Annie Dormuth, who is with the Canadian Federation of Independent Business in Alberta. This has been Business Insider with Mario Toneguzzi on YYC Business, brought to you by MegaPixx Media. Thanks for joining us.